So hey there fellow YouTubers, it's Frank Bush here again. In today's video I plan on talking about portable USB lighting systems. So when you're going off-grid or backcountry, that kind of thing, beyond just a basic headlamp, of what you could use if you wanted to set up a camp and have lighting there for an extended period of time. So I'm going to walk through some of the batteries, I'm going to walk through the solar panels, I'm going to walk through some of the different lighting options. I'm working everything in USB, so it's really small, lightweight, compact, and portable. So stay tuned for further details. Okay, so this is a good little flat spot. You say I'm at a beach environment, so the earth isn't the most level ground, if you will, but such is the nature of things. So I'll pull out my solar panel, pull out just a few different items and kind of walk through them. This is the hypochlorous acid generator that I showed in the previous video. Extremely handy if you ask me. And then I've got different lighting options. So I've got a goal 0 string. I'll just pull out the jumbled ball of wires, if you will. I'll deal with that in a minute. And then I've got different battery bank options that you can potentially use to keep things really lightweight and portable as you're cruising, hiking, and that kind of thing, going off grid. So I've just got a small battery, a medium size, and a large battery, and potentially I'll show it in a future video, but because I want to do a full build of that and walk through the exact kind of construct of how I make those things. But I've got a far larger battery that if you wanted to do a USB generator system to run lights and things for the next 10 years, stay tuned for future videos because I'll be putting that in one of those future videos. But I'll shift angles here and I'll kind of walk through these things in detail a little closer, yeah? So this isn't the only options, obviously, that you can get in USB lighting. There's literally thousands of options. But to kind of walk through things from the smallest up to the most robust, yeah? So I've got this little device here. I'll just use this battery bank as an example, where you simply plug it in and it lights up. So in fact, I'll use it with a smaller battery bank setup because it's kind of more the scale that someone would want to go with if they were wanting to be ultra lean. So as you can see, it just throws a bit of light. This is a flexible unit, so you can adjust it, and it's really designed to just give very, very small amounts of light, minimal power use. This thing's using 1, maybe 2 watts tops, so it's really a minimal setup. And then you can see separate from the portable solar panel that you would carry, there's next to nothing for this lighting system. This is a waterproof little unit, and I've owned these for years. I've used them in lots of the background scenes of previous videos that I've done in the past, where I've used this as a basic lighting system when I'm at camp, just to give me a way to read or a way to focus in on detail without having a robust lighting system. It really is kind of one of the most efficient ways, and this is really just to kind of step up from that, where it's the same kind of premise. You've got more lights, though it'll throw a little bit more light, so it uses a little bit more power, and it's got dimming features on it where I can adjust the brightness of things. I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up that well, but needless to say, has a few more LEDs, throws a bit more light. If I want to kind of light up the inside of a tent, this would be kind of more appropriate lighting to give me low-level lighting inside a tent and that kind of thing. So when it comes to the next step up now, I'll just set this aside for a second. When it comes to the next step up now, this is a USB light bulb. Now this thing uses about 5 watts, but the interesting reality is, yes, you can charge it via USB, as all these devices are that way. But these ones don't have any battery or anything built into them. This does. So it throws a significant amount of light. I set this up on ridge lines outside of my tent if I want to light up my camp area around me. They're not massive amounts of light. Like I say, it's if I remember correctly, I've owned this for a few years. It's 3 to 5 watts worth of power, of not huge amounts of light, but enough that you can definitely see where your tools are and stuff lying around camp. If you set your beer down, you know where it is, kind of thing. And the battery inside this will run this light for roughly about 4 hours. But I don't typically like to rely on just the battery that exists within these. It's really normally have this wired into a battery setup to truly extend the length of this. So when you're in the winter seasons and those types of things, you can have it that that the sun goes down at 5 o'clock in the location I'm in. The sun might go down at 4:45, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you know, you want to stay up until close to midnight, say. Now you need to have a good 5, 6, 7 hours of light, and you need to be able to provide that consistently. The little 4.5 hour battery that's in this, you know, now it's been a few years of owning it, it's probably down to about 2 hours of light that it'll actually throw. So it's not really truly adequate, but it is good in the regards of if you only have a single battery and you have a single plug-in and you want to set up more than one light, you can have this little unit and have it running independently after it's charged through the day, and then use your battery. You know, if you had a small scale battery that only had one USB, you could use your battery to run a secondary light or to charge devices and that type of thing. And then I'll step it up where that's the same kind of idea now, where you know, it's got the light bulb kind of concept, and it throws roughly the same light that the battery based one does. Sorry, I really should have straightened out all these cords, but I've put a 6-foot extension cord on it, and it has a 6-foot run itself. So this gives me a little bit more length. Then, like I say, I'll just plug that in and turn it on, and you can see it's got like a frosting, but this can be hung inside walled tents or from ridge lines around camp and that type of thing. And with this type of setup, like I say, I've got that extra length of cable where I can run it a bit of distance, so it's good in that regard, where if I want to, you know, kind of have this sitting on the ground, the battery bank, have that sitting on the ground, and I want to have this sitting up on a ridge line somewhere, I don't have to worry about the length of the cabling and that kind of stuff. So normally this I'd use quite often, where I'm plugged right into a larger battery bank so I can get the hours worth of time. You know, that's one of the, like I say, in the winter times you can go long periods of time where there is no sunlight, and it's good to have the capacity to be able to run lights for an extended period without them running out of power, and to easily be able to charge this battery bank the next day as you go through time. Yeah, so I'll just kill that. And then really the kind of deluxe version, if you will, I've got a Goal Zero string of LED lights, and I use these in my walled tent. This is kind of my glamping light setup, if you will. It really is the most luxurious, and it's, you know, it's slightly larger than the others and weighs a bit more, but it's got a string of 4 lights on it. I won't bother unraveling all those cords, but it has, I believe it's a 16-foot length of run. So when it comes to being able to set this up along the ridgeline of my wall tent, which I've done previous videos on, it's easy enough for me to turn around and set this into the ridgeline of the wall tent and throw lighting every couple feet inside the wall tent, where it literally lights up the entire zone. So it's really, really good in that regard. And you can see, I'll turn on, I've got 4 different lights. They've got high-low options on them where I can adjust how bright that I want it. So if I've got the kids in the wall tent with me, I can, you know, set the lighting off or set it on low. And I just set these, each light literally runs across the length of my wall tent. It's perfectly kind of distanced for the size of my wall tent, where I can have lighting at both ends of the tent and 2 lights in the middle. And so I can have it set up that if the kids are sleeping on one end of the wall tent, I can have a light running and be playing cards or whatever and that kind of thing. And like I say, this as well, beyond just being like a 16-foot length of run, I've also got this plugged in with a 6-foot extension cable, and as you can see, it works without issue. Hopefully the camera's picking up, you know, the brightness of the light. It is quite substantial. And when this thing is in a wall tent, I've had it where the entire wall tent was lit up, and it was like it was indoor lighting. This really, it uses a bit more power. I think this uses 8.5, 9 watts worth of power, so it does consume the juice because you're running 4 lights instead of 1. But they are very, very efficient little LED units that they use in these, and this thing's really durable. I've had this for, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years now, and I've used it on multiple occasions without issue. It also comes with little funky lighting, you can pop off these covers. You can adjust them so you can focus it like a spotlight, or you can kind of open it up and it'll throw light in a wider area. So you can really control the lighting with these far greater than you can the other options. But like I said, they're a heavier option. You've committed to carrying this bag with all of its kit into it, and it does consume more power. So, but what I find is when it comes to not just the amount of power you're consuming, but the amount of power you're capable of holding. So I'll shift camera angles here, and then I'll kind of walk through the batteries and talk about the different sizes of these and what to expect for performance out of them given the lighting that you're using here. Yeah. Okay, so these are all lithium ion batteries, and generally speaking, you're going to get about anywhere from 500 to 1,000 recharges out of these from dead to full. But to give you an idea, kind of the capacity, I'll first start off with this little one here. So this isn't much bigger than my middle finger. It's quite small really in its size, and hence the capacity of it isn't that great. You know, if I was wanting to run something as simple as this, where I turn around and say that is my core of my lighting system, realistically I would only want to use this in, say, near the end of June, in that area where I'm only looking at having the sun go down closer to about 10:30, so I only need lighting for an hour or two in the evenings, and I really just want to go ultra lightweight and small and portable and that kind of thing. Typically this would be underpowered for me, generally speaking. I like to have it where I do have the extra capacity, just in case some situation goes on where I'm having you know, conditions that aren't charging this battery well over previous days or over coming days. I know it's going to be bad weather and I'm not going to be able to get a lot of charge performance out of the solar panels. I wouldn't normally go with this unless it was really kind of, I went out for an overnighter on a weekend, it was a summer period, and I knew that I would have limited need for evening lighting, that it really wouldn't be a high priority to me. But like I say, given the size of them, I can easily just throw that into a pocket and take along a little solar panel with me, you know, and I'm off to the races. It's very compact. But realistically, like I say, if I get 2, maybe 3 hours of light out of something like this, you know, even at this size, I'm gonna get maybe 3 hours of light tops. And if I'm looking at running, you know, the Goal Zero gear, I'm only maybe going to get an hour out of this Goal Zero, you know, lighting system off a battery this size. The capacity just simply is not there. You know, when it comes to one of the near future videos that I want to do on my USB kind of solar generator, which is really way bigger than any of these in capacity. It's not much bigger in size than this unit, but in capacity I've switched over to lithium iron phosphate batteries in that build, and I've got the capacity to run say, one of these lights. I've already done testing on the setup where I was able to run one of these lights 5 days, 24 hours non-stop off a single charge. So it can, you know, it has substantially more capacity, but that would be something I'd take in to a base camp that I knew I'd be setting up for long term. So this here was about 2,000 milliamps, 2,500 milliamps, in around that range. You know, to give you an idea, if you're, you know, looking at kind of moving forward on buying stuff like this, this is about 2.5 amps that it can store into it. So it's really a fairly small unit. This unit is a step up from that. It has the capacity to hold about 5.5, 6 amps, so 5,500 milliamps, 6,000 milliamps, in around that range. And it's got an on-off button onto it where, I don't know if the lighting's picking up, it's about half full. So I'll set these up and plug them into the solar panel here in a little bit and kind of walk through that. But needless to say, this would give me about, you know, 4, 5, 6 hours depending on the light I'm running and how many watts it is. If I was running something like this light, I'd be able to get easily probably about 5, 6 hours out of it. And if I was running on something you know, larger that was throwing more light, maybe 4 hours, 4.5 hours, in around that range. But like I say, it's very small. You know, this is smaller than a pack of cigarettes, if you will. It can easily go into a pocket as well, but it does give that kind of increased performance. Where normally I would want to have this with me even in, you know, peak summer months, like I was talking about earlier, where, you know, going with the ultralight setup, I would probably prefer to have this kind of setup even if it was peak summer months. you know, just because I know that it has the additional capacity in it, and this has an output capacity of 5 watts, so I can run, you know, one of these light bulbs at a 5-watt light bulb. These you can normally buy in about 3, 5, 7, 9 watts, that kind of thing. Generally speaking, for around camp environments and to conserve my batteries, I tend to stick to 3 or 5 watts for these, because I find that they do throw enough light at that level of wattage to be able to kind of light up the camp around you. You could shift up to 7 or 9 watt light bulbs, and they will throw, you know, more light, obviously, because they're using more wattage, but I don't find it's really to a practical gain when it's, you know, when you're off grid and around camp and that kind of stuff. You just need to be able to see where you put your saw or your beer or your, you know, axe or whatever. The 3 watt gives you enough for that. You know, going up to 7 makes it that you could read easier, but typically if I was going to be reading, I'd be running on something like this and have it really close to the page and be more efficient with my power use. So whereas that kind of covers 2 of the really small ones. Now, I've shown this in previous videos before. This is one of my preferred lithium ion, if not my favorite lithium ion battery bank. It holds up to 20,000 milliamps, so 20 ampere hours. You know, when it comes to running lighting systems, I don't have concerns when it comes to running lighting off of this through the night. And generally speaking, you know, I'll plug in, and the nice part is I've got 4 different USB slots, so if I wanted to run more than one of these lights, I can plug in, you know, multiple lights, run a couple extension cords like I showed earlier in the video to kind of spread out the lighting around camp, and this unit can run this light bulb for a good 15-16 hours non-stop before I would need to charge this battery again. So, you know, if I'm running 2, I'm down to 8 hours, that kind of thing. To me, that's ample for around camp setups. That really, this sized system where I was running potentially, I know this is kind of a, you know, improv example, but, you know, these 2 lights having one 15 feet apart from the other around camp is normally enough for me to feel like, yeah, everything's lit up enough that I can do everything I need to do. And you can see, hopefully the camera's picking that up, the little red light here lets me know that the battery inside this unit is taking a charge. Yeah, so I'll shift gears here and I'll set up the camera on a different angle, and I'll start to plug in a few different devices here and show you kind of, even with a small portable setup like this, how I've easily got the capacity to run lights, charge devices, be able to use my hypochlorous acid generator and that type of thing, you know, all off a very small package. Of, to me, having this kind of kit can become invaluable to give you those kind of creature comforts where I've got the ability to provide persistent lighting for months and months on end. Like I say, the lithium ion batteries that exist in these, you know, can handle up to about 1,000 charges. You know, if you take that out, that's 3 years worth of daily use just off of this little unit. And I've owned these, I've got a couple of these, I've owned these for years, and I find that the performance on them has been quite robust. Given the size of the capacity of the battery, quite often, even if I take them out on a weekend and use them, I'm not hitting the battery hard and I'm not drawing it down to be a depleted state normally. And so the battery's life tends to kind of extend because the cycles that I'm putting on them aren't hard, and you know, I'm not daily cycling them from dead to full every day. There's enough capacity that exists within these that I can normally, with the power use I do, I'm very conservative about my power use when I'm around camp, but normally I can get 2 to 3 nights out of these, even if I wasn't plugged into a solar panel at all, you know, of so generally speaking, you know, that would only be 1 cycle over 3 days if I was going all the way to dead from 3 days and then charging it all back up again. So you can really extend the life cycle of these just, you know, by being gentle with them, if you will. But I'll shift camera angles and I'll actually kind of set this stuff up so you guys can see it in a functioning, you know, manner, if you will. Yeah, I'll just kind of walk through setting things up so that I can start taking a charge and that kind of thing. Yeah, so I'll simply open up my solar panels And then if you hear a bit of noise in the background, I'm at a beach and there's people that are close by, so, you know, such is life, right? But it's the nature of doing things in the outside world. I'll just pull out my little bits and bobs of cables that I always like to have with me and kind of pocket those for a few minutes. And open up the kickstands that exist on this. It's really that simple. Of kind of set that up. And now I'll shift camera angles and kind of zoom in on this, just in case you haven't seen previous videos of mine where I kind of touch base on this unit specifically. But yeah, I'll kind of shift camera angles and then I'll walk through, you know, plugging things in and getting things, you know, hooked up so that they're ready to charge and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So this kind of stuff always gets tricky, but you know, getting good camera angles. But in essence, hopefully the camera's picking that up. There's two USB here, and there's a USB that sits on this little cable run, and the blue light lets me know that this thing is taking a charge from the sun. So the thinking really is, like I say, there's little kickstands on it. You just pop those out, and that way it can kind of sit on its stand. And when it comes to plugging things in, it's really simple. So I've got my little 20 ampere hour Bear Grylls lithium ion battery bank there, and I'm simply gonna plug this directly into the USB that's on here. In fact, I'll plug into the quick charge one. There's one that throws a little bit more amps than the other, and then this is a USB-C. So on the back of the battery I've got oh, the other side, I've got a little USB-C that I can plug directly into, and hopefully the camera's picking that up, but it lets me know the little orange light's flicking, lets me know that it's taking a charge. So really, that's good. The battery's starting to take a charge now, and I can do things. I pulled a bit of salt water out of the ocean. I can do multiple things at one time with this simple of a setup. So not only am I, you know, taking a charge to kind of get my lighting system up and running, then I'll plug in the other into the other USB port there, and I'll just bust out my hypochlorous acid generator, and I could be running this, as I did a detailed video on this in the previous video, I think it was, that I put out. I'll just pop that open, and oh, I didn't even need to plug in this extra USB-C yet. I'll use that in a minute, but I'll just plug into the one that has the cable down at the bottom here. I'll plug in the hypochlorous acid generator, and I'll just drop that into the salt water, and that's now going to turn that salt water into hypochlorous acid, so that I can use this to turn salt water in, you know, make fresh water safe for consumption by chlorinating this into hypochlorous acid. You know, really electrifying salt water creates hypochlorous acid, which has high levels of chlorine in it. I take small amounts of this and add it into fresh water that potentially has, you know, pathogens and parasites, those types of things in this, and this will disinfect that water. So I'll shift camera angles and just show this in full functioning order here. Like I say, this is the hypochlorous acid generator, and you should see bubbles rising up off of this unit, and that really lets me know that it's working. So I'm able to run that and create the hypochlorous acid. You know, every few seconds you'll see a larger bubble. That's normally, I believe that's the hydrogen rising up off of it. There's hydrogen and chlorine that get broken off of the salt water, and the chlorine mixes into the water and makes it really chlorinated water, like pool water, and hence the hypochlorous acid, and the hydrogen just escapes. And like I said in the previous video, I did full details on you know, the usefulness of hypochlorous acid and the ability to purify water. So if you haven't seen that video, it's definitely worth checking out. And like I say, at the same point in time, I'll just shift camera here, at the same point in time we should see that the battery is taking a charge as well. I'm trying to just darken it off so you can see that, but the battery's taking a charge as well. So I'll stop and shift camera angles now, and I'll plug in my cell phone as well and start to throw a charge into that. Like I said a few minutes ago, I plugged in this additional USB, and There's my cell phone. We'll turn around and plug that in. Hopefully you heard that on the camera. I'm taking a charge on that now as well. Should be able to see that up in the top corner there. So as you can see, off this one solar panel, I'm able to charge my cell phone, create the hypochlorous acid, and charge the battery bank all at the same time. My battery's actually at 97%, so I'm not overly worried about charging my cell phone. I just wanted to show you that, you know, with this small of a setup, you could easily turn around and charge and run multiple devices at the same time off of this one unit. You know, it's really quite handy in that regard. So I'll just stop and shift things up a bit. And this really was just to show you that I'll finish making this hypochlorous acid in a minute. I'll just get that out. But I wanted to kind of stop and show you some secondary gains too. If you wanted to have it, yeah, I can smell the chlorine coming off that already. But if you wanted to have it where you weren't running any battery systems at all, and say you had an underground shelter and that type of thing, you know, you were really going incognito, if you will, you could easily switch up. And I'll just unplug this device and get that cable out of the way and set that over there. You could easily have it where obviously you're only going to be able to supply lighting in the daytime, but hopefully the camera's picking that up all right. This light is running now directly off of those solar panels. There's no battery involved whatsoever in this setup. So, and this is a, you know, a 12-foot run. You could easily set up this solar panel to be on ground, and if you wanted to add additional lighting to an underground shelter, you literally have these wires feed down into the earth and into your shelter, where, you know, you put in the extension cable run into the earth, and then you could easily have one end sticking out where if the light bulb burnt out or anything, you could swap out just the light side of things and have this cabling. You know, you could potentially add extra protection to the cabling and that kind of stuff, but it would allow you where you could have batteryless lighting systems underground being purely driven off of the solar panels that are above, you know, and this could last for years and years and years. You know, when it comes to these solar panels, I find them really excellent just for the, you know, smallness and the portability and that kind of stuff. But if you were wanting to go into a long-term off-grid scenario, you could use this to give you artificial lighting in an underground environment for years. Of these lights, quite often they're rated for 50,000 hours and that kind of thing, and you leave it all just plugged in. When the sun comes up, this lights up. When the sun goes down, it drops off. You know, it's not going to give you the buffer like a battery would, where if the sun was down, that you would be able to turn around and run your lights at night. But it would be easy enough to just put a battery in the line in between this. I didn't necessarily have to plug this light. I just did it as the example to show you I can run straight from the solar panel, but I could easily turn around and plug that into the battery and let the solar panels charge the battery and then off to the light if I wanted to go that way. And I could have these extension cables feeding down and into an underground shelter, or it doesn't even have to be underground. You could have it feeding into a shelter environment to increase your lighting, and choose whether or not you wanted to have batteries within that equation. You know, this type of setup is really, really good for that. I'd probably want to get solar panels that were a little more waterproof when it comes to these folder ones. These ones are water resistant, but I would want ones that were absolutely weatherproof in every way, be able to set it up, you know, above or outside of my shelter, and just have it driving lights on the inside to light up the inside environment, and not have to worry about, you know, the cycle life of batteries and everything else. But like I say, as an aside to that, I do plan on, in one of the near-term future videos I plan on doing, it'll be a Lifeboat Generator, where I plan on doing 100 ampere hour. This is only 20 ampere hours. I'm going to do a battery that's a little bigger than this, but it's 5 times the capacity. And because it's using a different, these are lithium ion batteries, and I'd be using lithium iron phosphate batteries, that the cycle life steps up to, you know, 4,000, if you will, cycles before those batteries are going to be drawn down to 80% capacity at maximum charge. that you could use that type of setup for, well, for me until I'm dead, really, before those batteries are going to run out. And I could do the same kind of thing if I was doing an underground shelter or that kind of stuff and wanted me to covert. The only thing you're going to see is these little solar panels sitting outside, you know. So I'll shift angles and kind of show you the face of them, because they really are small compact units. But hopefully that gives you an idea of the different lighting systems and that you can do. You know, to get these lights, I ordered these off eBay. They were about $4 or $5 each. They're not expensive units. It goes the same for pretty well all the lights, other than the longer string. They were a little pricier, but I really got those for the wall tent and wanted to have it where, you know, I had lots of lighting, and it was, you know, I wasn't overly worried about the fact that it used a bit more power. I just wanted to have a really good lighting system in my wall tent that was still portable and lightweight and easy to carry. But like I said, I could leave this set up now for days and days on end. And even when it comes to all the hypochlorous acid generator and all that kind of stuff, I don't have to plug it directly into the solar panels. I could just as easily switch over and plug things in. No, I shouldn't plug the battery into itself. I could easily turn around and switch over, and even if this was, like I said, sitting in a shelter environment, I could run through the battery and achieve the exact same results, where you know, I was able to produce my hypochlorous acid, so I had a disinfectant material to disinfect water and clean wounds and those types of things, and run my lighting and all that kind of stuff, and do it very discreetly and off of a very small solar panel. You know, this is only a 30-watt solar panel. It's not a massive setup. So, and it's, like I say, given the fact that it can fold and is compact and stuff, I can throw all this into a bag. I think the entire setup is less than 5 pounds. So, you know, it's really lightweight when it comes to setting all this up and being able to take it with me and that kind of stuff. But the functional use that it gives me, to me, is really ideal. It gives me the ability to run lighting, to disinfect water, to charge batteries, to charge devices and all that kind of stuff off a very small, lightweight, compact setup. And it really is up to your discretion of what type of battery do you want to go with, and how much lighting do you want to, you know, how powerful do you want your lighting. But you could easily use this in a urban setup or a, you know, bushcraft setup and that kind of thing. When the power has gone out in my house, historically, I've set this up, you know, when there was blackouts and stuff and storms and that kind of stuff, I put this up in a bedroom window and was charging it and ran lights. You know, we were out of power for a couple days, and was able to run lights and that type of stuff without issue through the entire blackout. So it was good in that regard. This was all before I set up the solar powered living room. If you've seen previous videos of mine, I've done a full solar powered living room. If you're wanting to look at, you know, upscaling and starting to run your home off solar without all the you know, restrictions and regulations and all that kind of stuff, I show methods of how to do that and hook into the grid, if you will, to toggle between the two without needing all the permits and everything else of, you know. But those are all side things of, like I say, there's separate videos on my channel where you can go and see those if you haven't already. But I'll shift angles here now and I'll just show you the front of this, and you can see it's very small and compact. Yeah. So, and like I say, this is kind of the front side of things now. It really is, it's an excellent setup. This folding solar panel is put out by Renogy. Now each panel's, you know, a little bigger than the size of my hand, but the amount of power that this produces for a little compact foldable setup, I find to be fantastic. You know, this is rated at 30 watts. Generally speaking, I find with any of these folding solar panels, you're lucky if you get about 60% of what the stated rated output is. If you get 15-20 watts out of one of these, to me, you're doing well. But on that same note, I sit back and say, well, the hypochlorous acid generator, that only uses about 2 to 3 watts. It uses very little amounts of power. When it comes to throwing power into the battery bank, it'll take up to 15 watts off of this setup. It'll take up to 15 watts an hour, and like I say, it has 20,000 milliampere hour, 20 ampere hour batteries. So from dead to full, if I leave this plugged in and this is the prime thing I'm charging, I should be able to fill this, well, I can fill this from dead to full in a single day. So it's really good in that regard of, when I can get 2 or 3 days worth of lighting out of this, it allows for a reality where even if I go a couple days where I get cloudy conditions and that kind of stuff, and I know that the weather's poor, and I can be conservative with my lighting and have this be reliable for providing lighting for 2 or 3 days before I start to worry about running out of power completely. And when it comes to these light bulbs, like I say, generally speaking, I like to run the 3 to 5 watt ones. That's only 1 ampere hour. You know, the way that these batteries are stored, I think it's 3.7 volts at the 20 milliampere hour, or 20,000 milliamps. But when that steps up to the 5 volts output, you don't get the full 20 ampere hour output. It has to drop the amps that it's going to produce because it increased the voltage a bit in the conversion to spit it out to the USB. So in reality, at 5 volts, you're getting closer to about 15 ampere hours. So these lights run at about 1 ampere hour at 5 volts, to give you an idea, to give you the 5 watt lighting. So I could run one of these lights for 15 hours non-stop from dead to full off of this battery before I charge. And normally I'm only running lights for 4 or 5 hours a night. So like I said, over 3 days, at 5 hours, that's 15. You know, that's right up to the capacity of roughly what I'm going to get out of this. But normally even on cloudy days, I find these solar panels, even if the weather is kind of crappy, I find these solar panels will still produce, obviously not as much as they do in full sun, but normally it'll help offset, so this thing won't be drawn down to absolute dead if there was 3 days of poor weather. You know, I just use that to give you an idea of, ideally you want to have it that whatever the size of the battery is going to give you about a 3 days supply of power without having to need to charge it based on the loads that you're doing. So if you kind of work out the math and say, I want to run a 5 watt light, I want to run it for 5 hours a day, you know, in essence you're going to be using 5 amps out of a battery, and then you sit back and say, well, I need 15 amps in the battery's capacity at a 5 volts equivalent in order for it to last 3 days. If I wanted to step up my watts, I'd have to step up my battery, and that way I know that I can turn around and have it, that I'm going to have a few days buffer for poor weather and that type of stuff. Especially where I'm at, I'm up in the Pacific Northwest, and quite often we'll have overcast and rain and those types of things. You have to take that into account, you know, especially when you're off grid. You don't want to have it where, you know, 1 or 2 days you're sitting with light at camp and the other 2 days you're sitting in the dark. You know, you want to try to plan it all out, and there's formulas that you can find available on the web and that kind of stuff for this. But generally speaking, that's the simple rule of thought I have, is whatever my load is going to be, you know, I times that by 3, you know, a load that I would have for a day, I times that by 3, and then that tells me how big of the batteries I need. And if I want to go larger than that, like I say, I plan on doing a really large scale USB generator. That's more for the idea of, I want to have that as an absolute reliable power supply for in my home, that if the power was to go down, you know, off-grid stuff happened, or, you know, and things happen in the world, if you will, there's war or other things, I want to have it that I have the ability to charge devices and run lighting and stuff for extended periods of time without even having to worry about sticking a solar panel out in the open, you know, but that's just the nature of me and kind of how I want to move forward with things. Everybody's demands are different. If you're really ultra lean, that little tiny, you know, battery that was the size of a finger with a little light would be enough for you. But typically I find this kind of level of setup is good for practical sense, you know, of being able to provide you a realistically usable amount of lighting, and being able to, like I say, create the hypochlorous acid so that you can make water safe to drink and that type of stuff. This level of setup will help you achieve those results. But if you like this type of content, like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching, yeah? Cheers.